Okay, I got a box of hardware in the mail. The screws and some of the different things that I needed, I bought from Noah's Marine Supply. It's kind of hard to find those square-headed screws that they use, but I'll put a link in the description below for the place where I bought them. Everything kind of adds up. This little box of parts here, screws, was $130. But you got to have it. You got to have stainless steel, marine grade. And you want to make sure you get something that you can use. If you haven't seen the other parts to this series, I'll link them also in the description. And you can follow along as I rebuild this Giesler boat. In the last video, I made the transom. In this video, we're going to put it in. I use this caulk that I found, and I taped up the transom, and I just put the caulk on it. I used Vulcan 116. You're going to have to figure out what the best caulk to use for this is. There's so many out there. This one here takes a long time to dry. You put it on, and then at least a day to really set up and dry. I spread it out on the transom, then I spread it out on the hull of the boat. Nice thick coat of it, so it'll get a good seal. Then I put the transom into the boat and just let it set after I got it all nailed up. I bought this at Menards. It's kind of a standard item, but it seems like it's a good hardening caulk. They had different colors. I kind of wish I would have got, they had a light color, a sand color. But this is what I got. I didn't worry about getting it on the inside because I've got the support boards to put on. Once I put it in there, I measured from the stern, made sure it was straight, made sure the bottom was kicked in. If you notice, I've got a little bit of an overhang all the way around, and I can cut that off later. We'll see that in a few minutes. And I just started nailing my nails from the bottom, going both ways, and nailing it in all the way around. All right, the next thing I did, I put those pieces in that I had already pre-made. And I probably shouldn't have put the motor mounts in first. They should have been put in last. That was a mistake. But everything's pre-drilled, and then I pre-drilled the transom. You better do that. You can't put those screws in without pre-drilling. Another thing is, you wouldn't really think of it, but stainless steel is not very hard. The stainless steel screws are a little bit harder than brass, but not as hard as steel. So I had to buy some steel screws and run the steel screws in first, and then put the stainless screws in. I coated everything that went together with an epoxy resin. I put the support pieces that go around all the edges in. I put the two in the sides and the one in the bottom. Again, pre-drilling everything and setting the screws. Then I put the supports, the extra supports. Everything that I did is a duplicate of what was on there before. I just matched it up and put it all the same way. These supports that are on an angle, they are bolted in. Now the old transom, they had used copper nails and bent them over. I used screws just because that's what I bought, and to me it was easier. But the pieces that are on an angle, they use bolts and what they call T-nuts. And the T-nuts hammer into the wood, so you have to drill a little bit of a bigger hole on the end and hammer the T-nut in. And then you put your bolt in from the other side. Everything's kind of cut and dried here, really just assembling it. Making sure I coated everything with epoxy and sealed up all the end grain that I could. The last thing that I had to do was put in the seat mounts. They went on the transom also, so I put those in and I had everything all together. And then I just let it set a couple days and let everything harden up. The next step was to make the transom knees, and I did that with the piece I had, and I cut off the right lengths. I needed a 2-inch piece for the bottom and 2 1-inch pieces for the side. So I just sawed them out of a piece I had and planed them down to the size that I needed. And then I took them in on the bandsaw and cut them. The one thing about the knees is you want the grain of the wood to go, I want to say, corner to corner. You can see how I have the piece of wood set in there so that your screws will hold. And I just traced it out on just the way it was before, and I left one tail longer so that if my transom is a little bit of a different angle, I can set it in place and then just trace the proper angle and come back and cut it to the right size. This is the bottom transom knee, and then I also did the 2 sides the same way and just cut them off with my bandsaw. Now the thing about putting those gunnel transom knees in is you have to get the screws into only one piece of the gunnel. So I had to loosen up a couple screws going back and pull the outer 2 pieces of wood up and clamp them. And that way I can get my screws tight without having to be through everything, but just through that one piece of wood. Everything I pre-drilled it exactly the way the old ones were. I think it took 2 in the front and 2 in the back, maybe 3 on the 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and maybe 3 in the side. I can't remember. Then it took 1 in each in one corner. It didn't have any in the back corner. And I just put all my screws in on that, and everything now is kind of moving along pretty good. I sure do need a haircut, but since the barbers aren't open for the past 3 months, I'm starting to look like a mess. That should pass pretty soon. Made sure I sealed up the end grain. You see my clamp, and you can see the piece going up on an angle, going uphill out of the way, so that I could put the screws in. on the transom. The back pieces on the transom are sticking way up, and I'm going to plane them off in a minute. But I did that on purpose so I can get the size right. There's a picture of I had the counter cut holes in the one and then go through into the transom. I had to just force that one piece up to get it out of the way. I put the transom knee on the same way I put the other ones on. Pre-cut all the holes to what the other ones were. I set it in place and drilled the other holes and put my poly on and set it in place and screwed it in just like the old one. I didn't have any trouble with the keel. The keel was still didn't have any rot to it, fortunately, because I didn't want to get involved in that. This one's screwed in with 4 screws going through the back and then 2 screws in the top. And then 2 screws going down on an angle on each side and 2 screws in the front there. And that finished that up pretty well. As I've been going, I've been stripping the sides. I'll talk about that in the next video, but doing a little each. Every time I get tired of doing stuff, I just get my stripper out and scrape the sides down, get as much off as I can. That's probably one of the biggest projects. Just keep stripping it, and you're not gonna, well, I'm not gonna get it white like it was originally. It's gonna show some patina. But it's a 46-year-old boat, so I guess that's okay for me. I'm really not restoring this. I'm trying to make it a boat I can use. I planed the sides down. You can see the side on the left is still sticking up, and the side on the right, I planed it flush with that knee, that corner knee there, and I got my sander out and sanded it down, sanded all the sharp edges off it and flushed it up. Then I got a saw and I cut what was sticking out of the transom close. I didn't get into cut it flush. I cut it close. Then I'm going to take my belt sander and belt sand it flush. Make sure you run in the belt sander so that it goes in the direction where it's not going to chip it out. It's just going to sand it flush. That cedar sand's pretty. I just took a lot of the meat off just to make it a little bit easier. Then I just put the sander on it and took it down to where it was flush. Then I sanded the whole transom down. You can see a little bit of the glue lines. So I sanded the transom, sanded everything down nice and smooth. I wanted to protect the finish, the wood. I didn't, while I'm working on everything else, I didn't want it to get all stained or dirty. So what I did, I just put a coat. First I put a coat of 2-part poly on, kind of to make it hard and seal it up real good. That stuff doesn't really harden unless you put something on top of it. So after that, I put a coat of varnish on it. And then I'll put another coat or two of varnish on it when I'm all through. But I just wanted to get that protected so it doesn't get all scratched up. I thought I had a picture of the inside stain, but I couldn't find it. So we'll get that later. So that'll about finish that up. And we'll move on from here. Thanks for watching.